The dust cloud swirled around Olivia Frost as she desperately tried to shield her students' eyes from the relentless grit that permeated everything in the makeshift schoolyard behind the dilapidated church. The drought of 1872 had turned San Jose, California, into a parched wasteland, nothing like the fertile valley she had known when her husband Thomas was still alive. "Children, cover your faces," Olivia called out, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. She pulled a handkerchief from her pocket and bent down to help little Mary Washington, who was sobbing as dust stung her eyes. The dozen children huddled together, their thin clothes offering little protection from the elements. "Mrs. Frost, can we go inside?" 10-year-old James Whittaker pleaded, his freckled face streaked with dirt and sweat. "The church roof is leaking again," Olivia explained, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had nowhere safe to take these children. "We'll wait for the dust to settle, then continue our lessons." Olivia's dark hair, once lustrous and full, had been hastily pinned beneath a faded bonnet. At 28, the past 2 years of widowhood had etched fine lines around her eyes, though they still shone with determination. Her calico dress hung loosely on her frame, evidence of too many meals sacrificed so her students could eat. The storm intensified, and Olivia made a quick decision. "Everyone, grab your slates. We're going to make a run for the general store. Mr. Peterson won't mind us taking shelter." As they prepared to dash across the street, Olivia heard the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats approaching. Through the swirling dust emerged a tall figure on horseback, the silhouette unmistakably that of a cowboy. He pulled his horse to a stop before them, and even through the dust, Olivia could see his keen eyes surveying the situation. "Madam," the stranger called out, tipping his hat. "That's no place for children in this storm." Olivia straightened, protective of her charges. "We're well aware, sir. We're about to seek shelter." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his tall, broad-shouldered frame. His face was weathered from years under the sun, but his expression was kind. He couldn't have been more than 35. "Name's Darius Blackwell," he said, extending a gloved hand. "I've got a wagon just down the road. Was heading to my ranch when this blew in. You and these youngsters are welcome to come along until it passes." Olivia hesitated, studying the stranger. His clothes were dusty but well kept, his manner direct but gentle. In his eyes she saw no malice, only genuine concern. "I'm Olivia Frost, the schoolteacher," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of the Virginia accent she'd never quite lost. "These are my students. I'm responsible for their safety." "Understood, Mrs. Frost," Darius nodded respectfully. "But that storm's only getting worse, and I've got a sturdy wagon with canvas covering. It's about 3 miles to my ranch, dry and warm. You'd be welcome there until it's safe to return." A violent gust sent a wooden sign crashing to the ground nearby, making several children scream. Olivia made her decision. "Children, this is Mr. Blackwell. He's offered us shelter from the storm. Stay together and follow me." Darius led them to a large wagon where his horse was already hitched alongside another. He helped the children climb aboard, lifting the smallest ones with gentle hands. Olivia noticed calluses on his palms, the mark of a man who worked hard for his living. Once everyone was settled under the canvas covering, Darius took the reins and guided the horses carefully through the dust-choked streets of San Jose. Olivia sat with the children, quieting their fears with soft words and reassurances. "Have you been teaching long, Mrs. Frost?" Darius asked over his shoulder, his voice carrying just enough to be heard over the wind. "Nearly 3 years now," she replied, not elaborating that she'd only taken up teaching after Thomas died of pneumonia, leaving her alone in a town where they'd only just settled. Teaching had been her salvation, giving purpose to days that would otherwise have been empty. "Those children seem mighty fond of you," he observed. A small smile touched Olivia's lips. "They're good children. Most of them come from families struggling to make ends meet. Learning gives them hope for something better." "Admirable work," Darius said sincerely. "My mother was a teacher back in Missouri before she passed. Always said there was no higher calling." As they traveled, the dust storm intensified, reducing visibility to mere feet ahead. Darius handled the team with confident expertise, never showing a moment's hesitation despite the challenging conditions. Olivia found herself studying him, the broad set of his shoulders, the way he spoke calmly to the horses, the gentle but firm manner in which he'd helped her students. After nearly an hour of slow progress, they crested a small hill, and Olivia caught her first glimpse of the Blackwell ranch. Even through the dust, she could see it was substantial, a large main house built of sturdy timber, a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. It wasn't ostentatious, but it bespoke prosperity born of hard work. "Welcome to Willow Creek Ranch," Darius said, a note of pride in his voice as he guided the wagon toward the main house. "Not much to look at today, but when the air's clear, the view of the hills is something to behold." As they drew closer, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was older, with silver-streaked hair and a round, friendly face. "Darius, what's all this?" she called out, her eyes widening at the sight of the wagon full of children. "Mrs. Perez, we've got guests," Darius replied, bringing the wagon to a stop. "The schoolteacher and her students caught in the storm. They'll need shelter until it passes." Mrs. Perez immediately sprang into action. "Lord above, those poor children. Bring them in, bring them in. I'll put on tea and heat up some stew." Darius helped everyone down from the wagon, then turned to Olivia. "Mrs. Perez is my housekeeper. Best cook in the county and kind as they come. You and the children will be comfortable here." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell," Olivia said sincerely, suddenly aware of how bedraggled she must look. "Your generosity won't be forgotten." "Darius, please," he insisted with a gentle smile that transformed his weathered face. Any decent man would have done the same. But as Olivia herded her students toward the warmth of the house, she thought that perhaps not every man would have noticed their plight or offered shelter so readily. There was something about Darius Blackwell that spoke of a goodness that went beyond common decency. Inside, the ranch house was warm and inviting, with simple but well-made furniture and clean, polished floors. Mrs. Perez bustled about, setting out cups of hot tea sweetened with honey for the children and showing them where to wash up. "Mrs. Frost, you look dead on your feet, Mrs. Perez said kindly. "Sit yourself down while I tend to these little ones." Olivia gratefully sank into a comfortable chair by the fire, watching as her students' faces brightened with the simple pleasures of warmth and safety. Darius moved among them, speaking gently to each child, learning their names, asking about their lessons. "You have a lovely home," Olivia remarked when Darius finally came to sit across from her. "Built it myself with some help," he replied, the firelight catching the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "Been expanding it bit by bit over the years. Never quite knew what for, truth be told. Seems awful large for just one man." "You've never married?" Olivia asked, then immediately flushed at her forwardness. "I'm sorry, that's terribly inappropriate of me to ask." Darius smiled, seemingly unbothered. "No apology needed. No, I never found the right woman. Been too busy building this place, I suppose. And you, the children called you Mrs. Frost." Olivia's fingers instinctively went to the simple gold band she still wore. "My husband Thomas passed 2 years ago. We'd only been in California a few months. He had dreams of starting an orchard." "I'm sorry for your loss," Darius said quietly, and Olivia could tell he meant it. Their conversation was interrupted as Mrs. Perez announced that stew was ready. The children gathered eagerly around the large kitchen table, their earlier fears forgotten in the face of hot food and safety. As they ate, the wind howled outside, occasionally rattling the windows, but inside all was warm and peaceful. Olivia watched as Darius gently coaxed shy little Sarah Miller to tell him about her favorite books, his patience seemingly endless. After the meal, when the children were settled in the parlor with books and simple games Mrs. Perez had produced, Darius took Olivia aside. "The storm's not letting up," he said, concern etched on his face. "It might be wise for you and the children to stay the night. I've already sent one of my ranch hands to town with messages for their families, so no one worries." Olivia hesitated. The propriety of staying overnight at a bachelor's home, even with Mrs. Perez present as chaperone, gave her pause. Yet the alternative, risking the children's safety in the storm, was unthinkable. "You're very kind, Mr. Black Darius," she said finally. "If you're certain it's no imposition, we would be grateful for the shelter." "No imposition at all," he assured her. "Truth be told, it's nice having young voices in the house. It's been too quiet here for too long." That evening, after the children had been fed a supper of corn bread and beans, Mrs. Perez organized sleeping arrangements. The girls would share the guest bedroom, the boys would sleep on pallets in the parlor, and Olivia would take the small study with its comfortable David. As Olivia helped tuck the children in, she was struck by how quickly they had adapted to these unexpected circumstances. Even normally, timid Mary was chattering happily to Mrs. Perez about the rag doll the housekeeper had found for her to cuddle during the night. Later, when the house had grown quiet and the children were asleep, Olivia found herself unable to rest. She wrapped a borrowed shawl around her shoulders and made her way to the kitchen for a glass of water. She was surprised to find Darius there, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a ledger open before him. "Can't sleep?" he asked, closing the book and standing as she entered. "It seems not," she admitted. "Too many thoughts whirling about, I suppose. Would you like some tea? Mrs. Perez left the kettle ready." Olivia nodded gratefully, and he set about preparing it with surprising deftness for a man who likely spent most of his days working cattle. "You're good with children," she observed as he handed her the steaming cup. "They've taken to you remarkably quickly." Darius smiled, the expression softening his rugged features. "Children and animals, they know who they can trust. No pretense with them." "Unlike adults," Olivia said with a small laugh. "Exactly so." He gestured for her to sit, then resumed his own chair. "May I ask how you came to be teaching in such difficult conditions? The church hardly seems adequate." Olivia sighed, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "When Thomas died, I had few options. I had some education from my father, who believed girls should learn as well as boys. Teaching seemed the natural choice. As for the conditions, San Jose has changed. The drought has driven away many families, and those who remain are struggling. The town council can barely maintain essential services, let alone support education properly. And those children, do they all have homes to return to? Most do, though some situations are precarious," Olivia admitted. "James Whittaker's father is often away looking for work. The Miller siblings stay with their aunt, who has too many mouths to feed already. I do what I can, but you're just one woman," Darius finished for her, "with limited resources." "Yes." Olivia took a sip of tea, finding comfort in its warmth. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing them any good at all, teaching poetry and arithmetic when some of them don't have enough to eat." "Education is never wasted," Darius said firmly. "My mother used to say that knowledge is the one thing that can't be stolen from you. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. His expression grew distant with memory. She taught in a one-room schoolhouse much like yours, I expect, devoted her life to it. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the howling wind outside making the warmth of the kitchen feel all the more precious. Tell me about your ranch, Olivia said finally. It seems quite successful. Darius's face brightened. I came west after the war, served with the Union Army, though I was just a boy, really. Had nothing but the clothes on my back and my father's pocket watch when I started. Worked as a ranch hand, saved every penny. Bought this land when no one else wanted it because the creek was said to run dry in summer. But it doesn't. There's an underground spring, he explained, eyes twinkling. I found it my first week here. The previous owner never bothered to dig deep enough. Now we have water year-round, even in drought years like this one. That's remarkable, Olivia said, genuinely impressed. You've built all this yourself then, with good help, he acknowledged. I've been fortunate to find loyal men to work with me. We raise cattle primarily, but I've diversified some. Got an orchard started on the north slope, apples mostly, some pears. An orchard? Olivia couldn't help the catch in her voice. Darius seemed to realize he'd inadvertently touched on a painful subject. Your husband's dream. I'm sorry if no, please, she interrupted. It's good to talk about it. Thomas would have loved to see an orchard thriving here. They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their pasts and hopes for the future. Olivia found Darius remarkably easy to talk to. There was no pretense about him, no hidden agenda in his questions or responses. By the time she finally retired to the study, she realized with some surprise that she had laughed more that evening than in the entire 2 years since Thomas's death. Morning brought clear skies and a transformed landscape. The dust had settled, revealing the true beauty of Willow Creek Ranch. From the porch where she stood with her cup of coffee, Olivia could see rolling hills, patches of forest, and the creek that gave the property its name, shimmering in the early sunlight. It's beautiful, she breathed as Darius joined her, already dressed for the day's work in sturdy trousers and a clean flannel shirt. It cleans up nice after a storm, he agreed, leaning against the porch railing. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, she admitted. Your home has a peace about it. Before Darius could respond, they were interrupted by the children, who came tumbling out of the house full of energy and excitement after their adventure. Mr. Blackwell, can we see the horses? James asked eagerly. Are there cows too? Little Sarah added. Darius laughed, a rich, warm sound that seemed to fit perfectly with the bright morning. Yes to both, if Mrs. Frost approves, and there are new calves in the north pasture. Olivia couldn't bear to disappoint them, though she knew they should return to town. Perhaps a quick tour before we impose on Mr. Blackwell for a ride back to San Jose. No imposition, Darius assured her, his eyes meeting hers with warmth that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. I've enjoyed the company. After breakfast, Darius showed them around the ranch. The children were delighted with everything: the horses in the corral, the chickens in the yard, and especially the calves that gazed at them with wide, curious eyes. Mr. Blackwell, how do you remember all their names? Mary asked in wonder as Darius identified each of his horses. Same way your teacher remembers all of yours, he replied with a wink at Olivia. They're family in their own way. By mid-morning, it was time to return to town. Darius hitched up the wagon himself, declining the offer of help from one of his ranch hands. As they prepared to leave, he pulled Olivia aside. Mrs. Frost, Olivia, he began, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. I have a proposition for you. Olivia raised an eyebrow, waiting. That church isn't fit for teaching, especially with winter coming, he continued. I have an old bunkhouse. It's solid, weatherproof, has a good stove. My men moved to the new quarters last year and it's just sitting empty. I'd like to offer it for your school. Olivia stared at him in surprise. But it's miles from town. The children couldn't possibly. I've thought of that, Darius said quickly. I could send the wagon each morning and afternoon to transport them. And he hesitated, then plunged ahead. There's the foreman's cabin too, small but comfortable. If you wanted to stay here, be closer to the school. Mr. Blackwell, Olivia began, flustered by his generosity. I know it's sudden, he acknowledged, and perhaps improper to suggest, but I've seen how you care for those children working in impossible conditions. I have the means to help. That's all. Olivia studied his face, finding nothing there but sincere concern. May I think about it? It's a significant change and I would need to consult with the parents. Of course, he agreed readily. The offer stands whenever you're ready. No pressure, no conditions. The ride back to San Jose was filled with chatter as the children excitedly recounted everything they had seen at the ranch. Olivia sat quietly, her mind turning over Darius's unexpected offer. By the time they reached town, word of their adventure had spread. Parents and relatives waited anxiously, rushing forward to embrace their children as the wagon pulled up before the church. Mrs. Frost, we were so worried, Mrs. Whittaker exclaimed, clutching James tightly. When that storm hit and you didn't return. Mr. Blackwell came to our rescue, Olivia explained, gesturing toward Darius, who was helping the last children down from the wagon. He provided shelter and hospitality far beyond what anyone could expect from a stranger. The parents gathered around, expressing their gratitude to Darius, who accepted their thanks with humble grace. Olivia noticed how he spoke to each parent with the same respect, whether they were well-dressed like Dr. Peterson or wore the patched clothes of struggling farmers like the Millers. When the children had dispersed with their families, Olivia found herself alone with Darius once more. Thank you again, she said, suddenly shy in a way she hadn't been at the ranch. For everything. It was my pleasure, he replied, his gaze direct and warm. Think about my offer. No rush. As he prepared to leave, Olivia impulsively reached out to touch his arm. Why are you doing this? You don't know me or these children. Darius's expression grew serious. When I came west after the war, I was lost, seen too much, too young. An old schoolteacher took me in, gave me books to read, taught me that there was still good in the world despite what I'd witnessed. I never got to thank her properly before she passed. Perhaps this is my way of honoring her memory. With that, he tipped his hat, climbed back into his wagon, and drove away, leaving Olivia standing in the dusty street with a head full of possibilities she had never dared to consider. The following week was a whirlwind of activity. After careful consideration and consultation with the town council and the children's parents, Olivia made her decision. The offer of a proper schoolhouse, even 1 mile from town, was too good to refuse given the deteriorating conditions of the church. Surprisingly, the parents had been overwhelmingly supportive. Many had heard of Darius Blackwell by reputation, a fair employer, an honest businessman, a generous neighbor in times of need, and the promise of reliable transportation for their children sealed their approval. On a bright Saturday morning, Olivia found herself standing before the small cabin that would be her new home, a single trunk containing her meager possessions at her feet. The foreman's cabin, as Darius had called it, was indeed small but charming, a main room with a stone fireplace, a tidy kitchen area, a bedroom just large enough for her bed and dresser, and a covered porch that looked out over rolling hills. Is it suitable? Darius asked, watching her face anxiously as she explored. "It's perfect," she assured him, running her hand along the smooth wooden mantel. "I haven't had a proper home since Thomas." "I'm glad," he said simply. "The bunkhouse is ready too. My men added more windows for light and built proper desks. Mrs. Perez insisted on curtains." Olivia laughed. "She's a force of nature, your housekeeper." "That she is," Darius agreed with a fond smile. "She's already planning what to feed the children for their midday meal. Said growing minds need proper nourishment." "She's right, of course," Olivia said, thinking of how many of her students came to school with little or nothing to eat. "But I can't possibly accept more charity. The school and transportation are already so generous." Darius's expression grew serious. "It's not charity, Olivia. I'm proposing a proper arrangement. You'll teach, that's your contribution. I'll provide the facilities and meals, that's mine. Equal partners in educating these children." "Partners," Olivia repeated, testing the word. It had been so long since she'd been anyone's partner in anything. Since Thomas died, she had shouldered every burden alone, made every decision in isolation. The idea of sharing responsibility was both frightening and oddly exhilarating. "Yes," Darius confirmed, his eyes never leaving hers. Partners. The following Monday, Willow Creek School officially opened. The converted bunkhouse had been transformed into a bright, airy classroom, with rows of desks facing a blackboard that Darius had somehow procured from Sacramento. Bookshelves lined one wall, stocked with volumes from Darius's personal library and new readers he had ordered specially. The children's excitement was palpable as they tumbled from the wagon, eyes wide at their new surroundings. Even the oldest boys, who typically affected disinterest in their studies, couldn't hide their amazement. "Is this really all for us, Mrs. Frost?" Mary asked in wonder, stroking the smooth surface of a desk. "It is indeed," Olivia confirmed, her heart full as she watched her students explore the classroom. "Thanks to Mr. Blackwell's generosity. Will Mr. Blackwell visit us sometimes?" James wanted to know. "He promised to teach me about horse breeds." "I'm sure he will," Olivia replied, catching sight of Darius himself standing in the doorway, a quiet smile on his face as he observed the children's reactions. That first day set the pattern for the weeks that followed. Darius's wagon would collect the children from town each morning and return them each afternoon. Olivia would teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and history in the bright classroom. At midday, they would all walk to the main house where Mrs. Perez had a hot meal waiting. Often, Darius would join them, listening with genuine interest as the children chattered about their lessons. Gradually, Olivia settled into life at Willow Creek Ranch. Her small cabin became a true home, with wildflowers in jars on the table and her mother's quilt on the bed. In the evenings, after preparing the next day's lessons, she often found herself invited to the main house for supper, where conversation with Darius and Mrs. Perez flowed easily. She learned more about Darius during these quiet evenings: how he had fought at Gettysburg when barely 18, how he had wandered west afterward seeking peace, how he had built his ranch acre by acre through sheer determination. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Virginia, her brief happy marriage to Thomas, her dreams of someday writing children's books of her own. One evening in late October, as autumn painted the hills in gold and crimson, Darius invited Olivia to ride with him to see the sunset from his favorite spot on the property. They rode side by side, Olivia on a gentle mare Darius had chosen especially for her, until they reached a high ridge overlooking the entire valley. "It's breathtaking," Olivia murmured as they dismounted. The setting sun cast long shadows across the land, gilding everything in warm light. In the distance, She could see the main house and barns, smoke rising peacefully from the chimney. "This is where I decided to build the ranch," Darius told her, standing close beside her. "Camped here my first night on the property. Woke up to this view and knew I'd found home." Olivia turned to look at him, struck by the peace in his expression. "You've created something remarkable here, Darius, something lasting." "I hope so," he said quietly, "though there are still things missing." "Oh, what could possibly be lacking?" Darius hesitated, then turned to face her fully. "Olivia, I've grown to care for you deeply these past weeks. Your strength, your kindness, your dedication to those children. I've never met anyone like you." Olivia's heart began to race, her breath catching in her throat. "Darius." "I'm not asking for anything," he assured her quickly. "I know you're still grieving Thomas. I know this arrangement between us is unconventional enough already, but I wanted you to know that if someday, when you're ready, I'm here. My heart is here." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes, unexpected but not unwelcome. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Darius replied gently. "Just know that you're not alone anymore. Whatever you need, friendship, support, or perhaps someday more, I'm here." Impulsively, Olivia reached for his hand, her small fingers interlacing with his larger ones. "Thank you for everything you've done, everything you are." They stood together in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, hands joined, hearts beating in a new rhythm of possibility. As autumn deepened into winter, life at Willow Creek School flourished. The children's progress was remarkable, freed from the discomfort and distractions of their previous classroom. They absorbed knowledge eagerly. Even more noticeable was their physical improvement. Regular meals and protection from the elements had brought color to pale cheeks and energy to tired limbs. Olivia found herself thriving as well. For the first time since Thomas's death, she was looking forward rather than backward, making plans for the future instead of merely surviving the present. And at the center of those tentative plans, increasingly, was Darius. They had fallen into a comfortable routine. Most evenings they would share supper, sometimes with Mrs. Perez, sometimes just the two of them when the housekeeper visited her sister in town. Afterward, they would sit by the fire reading, discussing the day's events, or simply enjoying each other's company in peaceful silence. Darius never pressed for more than Olivia was ready to give, respecting her need to move forward at her own pace. But his feelings were clear in 100 small ways: the fresh flowers that appeared on her desk each Monday morning, the books selected specifically to interest her, the way his eyes followed her when she moved about the room. For Olivia, the realization that she was falling in love again came gradually, then all at once. It happened on a crisp December afternoon when the first snow of the season began to fall. The children had been dismissed early, the wagon taking them home before the roads became difficult. Olivia was gathering her teaching materials when Darius appeared in the classroom doorway, his broad shoulders dusted with snowflakes. "May I walk you home?" he asked, as he often did. "I'd like that," she replied, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. They stepped out into the gently falling snow, walking side by side along the path that led from the schoolhouse to Olivia's cabin. The world was hushed, transformed by the white blanket that softened every edge and muffled every sound. "I've always loved the first snow," Darius remarked, his breath visible in the cold air. "Everything feels new, like a fresh start." Olivia looked up at the flakes swirling against the gray sky. "In Virginia, my father used to say that snow was God's way of cleaning the slate, giving the world a chance to begin again." "A wise man, your father." "He was," Olivia agreed. "He would have liked you, I think. He valued honesty above all else." "High praise," Darius said, a smile warming his eyes. I hope I would have deserved his good opinion." They had reached Olivia's cabin, but neither made a move to part. Instead, they stood facing each other as the snow collected on their shoulders and hair. "Darius," Olivia began, her heart suddenly pounding, "I've been thinking about what you said that evening on the ridge." His expression grew serious, attentive. "Yes, you said you'd be here when I was ready, I think. I think perhaps I am." For a moment, Darius stood perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. Then, with infinite gentleness, he reached out to brush a snowflake from her cheek. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. "I don't want you to feel any obligation, any pressure." Olivia smiled, covering his hand with her own. "I'm certain. These months at Willow Creek have healed something in me I thought would always remain broken, and you've been a large part of that healing." Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, Darius leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deepening as Olivia responded, her arms sliding around his neck. When they finally parted, both were breathless, snowflakes melting on their warm faces. "I never thought I'd find love again," Olivia confessed, still held in the circle of his arms. "After Thomas, I believed that part of my life was over. And I never thought I'd find it at all," Darius replied. "Not until you appeared in that dust storm with a dozen children in tow." They laughed together, joy bubbling up irrepressibly between them. "Come inside," Olivia invited. "I'll make tea." In the warmth of her small cabin, they talked long into the evening, making plans and sharing hopes. Darius spoke of his dreams for the ranch, how he'd always envisioned children running through the fields and filling the house with laughter. Olivia confided her ambition to write stories that would inspire young minds, perhaps even establish a proper academy someday. As the snow continued to fall outside, cocooning them in a private world of possibility, they began to weave their separate dreams into a shared vision of the future. Word of their courtship spread quickly through San Jose. Most reactions were positive. The parents of Olivia's students had seen the positive changes in their children's education and well-being, and credited much of it to Darius's generosity. A few voices raised concerns about propriety, given Olivia's status as a widow living on Darius's property. But these were largely silenced by the obvious respect with which Darius treated her, and Mrs. Perez's formidable presence as chaperone. By spring, when the hills around Willow Creek Ranch exploded in wildflowers and new life, Darius asked Olivia to be his wife. He proposed not with grand gestures or elaborate speeches, but with simple honesty as they walked together through his apple orchard, now budding with pink and white blossoms. "This orchard reminds me of Thomas sometimes," Olivia admitted as they paused beneath a flowering tree. "His dream of growing things, creating beauty from the earth." "Does that make you sad?" Darius asked gently. She considered for a moment. "No, not anymore. It makes me grateful that I can remember him without pain now. And grateful that his dream lives on, even if he couldn't see it through himself." Darius took her hands in his. "Olivia, I've been thinking. This ranch, everything I've built, it's all just wood and land without someone to share it with. Would you consider making it truly a home? Would you marry me?" Tears filled Olivia's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were wed in early June in the garden behind the main house, surrounded by the children from the school and friends from both the ranch and town. Olivia wore a simple dress of pale blue silk, a gift from Darius, with wildflowers in her hair. Darius, typically seen in work clothes, cut a handsome figure in a new black suit, his face shining with happiness as he watched his bride approach. Reverend Thompson, who had traveled from San Jose for the occasion, spoke of new beginnings and of love that heals and transforms. Mrs. Perez wept openly throughout the ceremony, while the ranch hands stood awkwardly in their Sunday best, hats clutched in rough hands, genuinely pleased for their boss who had always treated them fairly. "I, Darius, take you, Olivia, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Darius vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When Olivia repeated the vows, her voice clear despite her tears, she felt Thomas's memory blessing her choice rather than haunting it. She would always carry him in her heart, but that heart now had room for a new love, different but equally precious. After the ceremony, tables were set up under the trees, laden with food prepared by Mrs. Perez and the women from town. Children ran laughing between the tables, their usual school decorum forgotten in the festivity of the day. Music from a fiddle and guitar played by two of the ranch hands filled the air, and as evening fell, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the celebration. "Are you happy, Mrs. Blackwell?" Darius asked as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. "Completely," Olivia assured him, gazing up into the face that had become so dear to her. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he replied, drawing her closer. "This is just the beginning, Olivia, just the beginning of our story." As summer progressed, Olivia and Darius settled into married life with surprising ease. They moved into the main house together, though Olivia kept her small cabin as a writing retreat where she worked on the children's stories she had long dreamed of creating. The school continued to thrive, with Olivia adding music and art to the curriculum luxuries that would have been impossible in their previous conditions. Darius, always supportive of her teaching, now took an active role in the school himself, occasionally giving lessons on ranching, horsemanship, or the natural history of the valley. The children adored these special days when Mr. Blackwell would lead them on expeditions around the property, teaching them to identify plants, track animals, or read weather patterns in the clouds. Their happiness seemed complete, yet as autumn approached once more, Olivia began to notice subtle changes in herself, a persistent tiredness, a sensitivity to certain foods, a tenderness in her body. She kept her suspicions to herself until she was certain, wanting the moment of sharing such news with Darius to be perfect. The opportunity came on their 4-month anniversary. Darius had arranged a special supper for just the two of them, sending Mrs. Perez off to visit her sister for the night. He cooked himself a skill Olivia had been surprised and delighted to discover he possessed, preparing all her favorite dishes. As they sat together in the warm glow of candlelight, Olivia knew the time had come. "Darius, I have something to tell you," she began, her heart fluttering with anticipation of his reaction. He set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "What is it, love?" "We're going to have a child," she said simply, watching his face. For a moment, Darius sat perfectly still, his expression one of stunned disbelief. Then, as the news sank in, his face transformed with a joy so pure it brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "A child," he repeated, his voice breaking. "We're going to have a baby." Olivia nodded, smiling through her tears. In early spring, the doctor believes, around March, Darius was out of his chair in an instant, kneeling beside her, his strong hands gentle as they covered hers. "Olivia, my love, my heart. There are no words for what I'm feeling right now." "I know," she whispered, leaning down to kiss him. "I feel the same." That night, lying in each other's arms, they talked of the future of the child they would welcome, of the family they would build together, of the love that would fill their home. Boy or girl, it doesn't matter to me, Darius said, his hand resting protectively on Olivia's still flat stomach. Just healthy and happy. And loved, Olivia added. So very loved. That goes without saying, he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. No child could be more wanted or more treasured. As Olivia's pregnancy progressed, the entire ranch seemed to hold its collective breath in anticipation. Mrs. Perez fussed over her constantly, preparing special teas for morning sickness and insisting she rest whenever possible. The ranch hands treated her with a kind of reverent care, rushing to help her with even the smallest task. And the children from the school watched in fascination as their teacher's body changed, full of questions about the baby that Olivia answered with her usual patient honesty. Darius, for his part, was the most attentive of husbands. He insisted on hiring an assistant teacher, a young woman named Miss Clark from Sacramento, to share Olivia's duties as her pregnancy advanced. He read every book on childbirth and infant care he could find, determined to be prepared for every eventuality. And each night, he would talk softly to Olivia's growing belly, telling the baby stories about the ranch and the animals, about the brave mother who had first captured his heart in a dust storm. Winter settled over Willow Creek Ranch, bringing cold winds and occasional snow, but inside the Blackwell home, all was warmth and anticipation. Darius converted a room adjacent to their bedroom into a nursery, crafting a cradle himself from the wood of an oak tree that had fallen on the property the previous year. "My father made my cradle," he explained as he carefully sanded the smooth curves of the wood, "and his father before him. It's a tradition I want to continue." Olivia, sitting nearby with her mending, smiled at his dedication. "Our child will cherish it, knowing their father made it with such love." As February gave way to March, and Olivia's time grew near, a late winter storm descended on the valley, bringing heavy snow and howling winds that reminded her of the dust storm that had first brought her to Willow Creek. School was suspended, the roads too treacherous for travel, and Darius kept the ranch hands close to the main buildings, wary of anyone becoming lost in the blinding snow. It was during the worst of the storm, when the wind rattled the windows and the snow piled high against the doors, that Olivia felt the first pains. She had been helping Mrs. Perez prepare supper, kneading dough for bread, when a sharp cramp seized her lower back. "Mrs. Perez," she said, her voice calm despite the sudden certainty that her time had come, "I think you should fetch Darius." The older woman took one look at Olivia's face and understood immediately. "The baby is coming. Sit yourself down, Mrs. Blackwell. I'll get him and send Miguel for the doctor." But when Darius arrived, breathless and wide-eyed with concern, they all knew the doctor would never make it through the storm in time. "The baby isn't waiting for fair weather," Olivia said with a brave smile, gripping Darius's hand as another contraction gripped her. "Then we'll manage ourselves," Darius declared, his voice steadier than he felt. "Mrs. Perez has helped deliver babies before, and I've birthed countless calves and foals." "Not quite the same thing," Olivia laughed weakly, "but I trust you both." What followed was a night of labor that tested Olivia's strength to its limits. Mrs. Perez took charge, her usual deference to her employers set aside in the face of this more important hierarchy of experience. Darius never left Olivia's side, supporting her through each contraction, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement when her courage flagged. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known," he told her as dawn approached and her labor intensified. "Our child is blessed to have you as a mother." Finally, as the first pale light of morning filtered through the snow-covered windows and the storm began to abate, Olivia gave a final, tremendous push. and their son was born a healthy, robust boy with a shock of dark hair, and once he was cleaned and wrapped in a soft blanket, eyes that promised to be the same hazel as his father's. "He's perfect," Darius whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as Mrs. Perez placed the tiny bundle in Olivia's arms. "Absolutely perfect." "Thomas Daniel Blackwell," Olivia said softly, looking down at their son's face with wonder, "for your father and for mine." Darius's eyes filled with fresh tears at the honor of having his father's name carried forward. "It's a fine name for a fine boy." "The finest," Mrs. Perez agreed, her own eyes suspiciously moist as she busied herself tidying the room. "Strong lungs on him, too, from the sound of that cry." As if to prove her point, young Thomas let out another healthy wail, causing all three adults to laugh with relief and joy. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of exhaustion and exhilaration for the new parents. Thomas proved to be a good baby, with a healthy appetite, and after the first challenging weeks, a disposition to sleep soundly through most of the night. Darius took to fatherhood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything, never hesitating to change a diaper or walk the floor with a fussy infant while Olivia rested. Spring came to the valley in a rush of green, the land reawakening after the hard winter. As soon as the weather allowed, Olivia began taking Thomas outside, showing him the world he had been born into, the flowers emerging from the soil, the new calves in the fields, the birds returning to nest in the trees. "He'll grow up knowing the rhythm of the seasons," she told Darius as they sat together on the porch one mild evening, Thomas asleep in her arms. "Just as you did, just as I did. There's something right about that, something essential." "He'll have the best of both our childhoods," Darius agreed, "and none of the hardships. He'll grow up secure in love, never doubting he belongs." School resumed with Olivia teaching part-time, bringing Thomas with her in a basket that sat beside her desk. The children were enchanted with the baby, competing for chances to peek at him during lessons or help rock his cradle when he fussed. "You've given them something precious," Miss Clark observed one afternoon as the oldest girls took turns carefully holding Thomas while Olivia reviewed arithmetic with the younger children. "Many of these children have never seen a baby treated with such tenderness. You're teaching them more than books can." Life settled into a new pattern at Willow Creek Ranch, the days shaped by the needs of the growing baby and the seasonal work of the ranch. Olivia found that motherhood, demanding as it was, deepened rather than diminished her other passions. She continued teaching, her connection with her students enhanced by her experience as a mother. She resumed work on her stories, often writing with Thomas sleeping beside her, drawing inspiration from the pure wonder with which he viewed the world. Darius watched his wife and son with a contentment that sometimes overwhelmed him. This family, this life they were building together, exceeded every dream he had ever dared to have. When he thought back to that dust-choked day when he had first spotted Olivia struggling to protect her students, it seemed both yesterday and a lifetime ago. As Thomas's first birthday approached, bringing them full circle through the seasons, Darius found Olivia sitting on their porch one evening, gazing out at the sunset with their son sleeping against her shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Blackwell," he said, settling beside her. "I was just thinking about how much can change in a year," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "This time last year I was struggling to teach in that drafty church, wondering how I would keep going. And now," he prompted when she fell silent. "Now I have everything I never dared hope for," she finished, turning to look at him with eyes full of love. "A husband who respects and cherishes me, a son who brings joy with every smile, work that fulfills me, a true home." Darius tightened his arm around her, his heart too full for words. "And there's one more thing," Olivia added, a hint of mischief in her smile. "Something I discovered just yesterday." "Oh," Darius raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "It seems Thomas will have a brother or sister come winter," she said, watching his face carefully. "I suspected for a while, but wanted to be certain before telling you." For the second time in their marriage, Darius found himself speechless with joy. Instead of words, he expressed his feelings with a kiss, pouring all his love and gratitude into the gentle pressure of his lips against hers. "Another child," he breathed when they finally parted. "Our family is growing. Just as this ranch has grown, just as our school has grown," Olivia agreed. "From seeds planted in difficult soil, nurtured with care and faith." They sat together as twilight deepened into night, their sleeping son a warm weight between them, the promise of their second child a secret joy they held close. Above them, the first stars emerged in the darkening sky, bearing witness to the quiet miracle of love found amidst hardship, of hope rekindled from ashes, of a future built with patient hands and open hearts. In the years that followed, Willow Creek Ranch flourished, as did the Blackwell family. Their second child, a daughter they named Elizabeth Rose, was born on a clear winter night with the doctor in attendance, this time much to everyone's relief, though Darius privately thought that nothing could match the raw, powerful experience of bringing Thomas into the world during that snowstorm. 2 years after Elizabeth came another son, Michael James, a spirited boy who from his earliest days seemed determined to keep pace with his older siblings. The 3 Blackwell children grew strong and happy, raised with a blend of Darius's practical ranch wisdom and Olivia's love of learning. The school, too, continued to thrive. What had begun as a temporary solution for a handful of struggling students became a respected institution, drawing families from miles around. Eventually, the old bunkhouse could no longer accommodate all the pupils, and Darius built a proper schoolhouse with multiple classrooms and a small library named in honor of his mother. Olivia fulfilled her dream of writing, publishing a series of children's books based on life at Willow Creek. Her stories, illustrated with her own simple but charming drawings, found an audience beyond the valley, bringing letters from children in places as distant as Boston and St. Louis. Through it all, the love between Darius and Olivia remained the cornerstone upon which everything else was built. It deepened with each passing year, tempered by the inevitable challenges of life but never diminished by them. They faced each difficulty together, droughts that threatened the ranch, illnesses that frightened them, disagreements that tested their patience. Each trial overcame only strengthened their bond. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Darius surprised Olivia with a special gift, a small, bound journal he had kept since the day they met, recording his thoughts and feelings as their relationship evolved. "I never told you," he admitted as she turned the pages with wonder, reading his private reflections on their earliest encounters. "But I fell in love with you that very first day, when you stood in the dust protecting those children with nothing but your own body as a shield. I saw your courage, your devotion, and I was lost. And I thought you were merely being kind," Olivia marveled, touching the words he had written about the night of Thomas's birth, the depth of his emotions poured onto the page. "Kind, yes," Darius agreed with a smile, "but also completely captivated." As the children grew older, they took on increasing responsibilities at the ranch and in the school. Thomas, who inherited his father's way with animals, began helping train the younger horses. Elizabeth, thoughtful and observant like her mother, assisted with the younger students. Michael, creative and mechanically minded, was constantly inventing improvements to the ranch equipment, some more successful than others. One autumn evening, when Thomas was 16, Elizabeth 14, and Michael 12, the family gathered on the porch after supper as they often did. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, the sky ablaze with stars. "Papa, tell us again how you and Mama met," Elizabeth requested, leaning against her father's chair. Though she had heard the story countless times, it remained her favorite. Darius exchanged a warm glance with Olivia before beginning. "It was the worst dust storm I'd ever seen. I was heading back to the ranch when I spotted a group of figures huddled by the old church in San Jose. As I got closer, I saw it was a woman and a dozen children, all trying to shield themselves from the dust." "And the woman was Mama," Michael interjected, knowing his part in the familiar tale. "Indeed it was," Darius confirmed. "The bravest, most beautiful woman I'd ever laid eyes on, though she was covered in dust from head to toe. She was trying to protect her students, using her own body to block the worst of the wind." "What did you think when you saw Papa, Mama?" Thomas asked, turning to Olivia. Olivia smiled, remembering. "I thought he looked like he had stepped out of a storybook, tall and strong on his horse, appearing through the dust like some kind of mythical figure. I was wary at first, of course. A strange man offering help was not always a blessing in those days. But you trusted him," Elizabeth said with satisfaction. "I did," Olivia acknowledged. "There was something in his eyes, a kindness, an honesty that convinced me he truly wanted to help." "And then you brought everyone to the ranch," Michael continued, "and made soup and bread for the children." "That was Mrs. Perez," Darius corrected with a laugh. "I'd have likely burned the soup and underbaked the bread." "And then you fell in love," Elizabeth sighed romantically. "Not quite so quickly," Olivia said, reaching over to take Darius's hand. "But yes, eventually we fell deeply in love. And built all this," Thomas added, gesturing to the ranch spread out before them, the buildings illuminated by the rising moon. "We built it together," Darius agreed, his eyes meeting Olivia's with the same warmth they had held for all these years. "Everything that matters we built together." Later that night, when the children had gone to bed and the house had fallen silent, Olivia and Darius stood together at their bedroom window, looking out over the land that had nurtured their family. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if there hadn't been a dust storm that day?" Olivia asked, nestled in the circle of her husband's arms. "If you had taken another road, or if I had dismissed school early?" "Sometimes," Darius admitted. "But then I think perhaps we would have found each other anyway, somehow. Some things are meant to be, Olivia." She turned in his embrace to face him, reaching up to trace the beloved features that time had only made dearer to her, the laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, the touch of silver at his temples, the strong jaw that their sons had inherited. "I believe that too," she said softly. "Through all the dust and storms of life, we were meant to find each other, to build this life, to love each other." Darius lowered his head to kiss her, a kiss filled with the weight of their shared history and the promise of all the years still to come. Outside, the land slept under the watchful moon, the creek that had first drawn Darius to this place flowing steadily as it had for countless years before them, and would for countless years after. Within the sturdy walls of the home they had created together, the Blackwell family slept peacefully, 3 children dreaming of their futures, and 2 souls entwined as completely as it was possible for 2 people to be. From the ashes of loss and loneliness, they had built something enduring, a love story written not just in grand gestures or passionate declarations, but in the quiet dailiness of shared burdens and simple joys. A story that would continue in the lives of their children, and their children's children, rippling outward like the waters of Willow Creek after a spring rain. And it had all begun with a cowboy, a dust storm, and a widow teaching children in the most adverse of circumstances, a chance meeting that proved to be the beginning of everything.